Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BuzzStream Podcast. I'm your host, Vince Nero, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Olivia Lott.
Hi.
Olivia is a freelance digital PR. She has worked for numerous companies in the past: Pandable, iProspect, Crowd, Redico. Before that, she was actually a journalist, regional news pubs in the UK. Olivia, you've worked on dozens of clients over the years, and I find you and most of the BuzzStream team here will agree, one of the top digital PRs on the scene today. So I was, like I
Great.
said, thrilled to have you here. So thanks so much for coming on.
No, it's great to be here. Thank you. I'm a ride or die BuzzStream fan. Been using BuzzStream for my entire career, and yeah, still rely on it. So glad to have you.
Yeah. Paul May, our CEO, founder, for people listening, watching, he actually suggested I reach out to Olivia. He was like, Olivia's like you said, like a ride or die bus stream. She does outreach the right way. Like I feel like she encompasses what we try to preach or what I try to write about on the blog. So I was like, all right, Olivia, we got to chat. So we got to chat a few times before this and kind of formulate some ideas for what this podcast might look like. And our initial chat went all over different places. It was really interesting. One of the first things that really popped out to me was the fact that you worked as a journalist briefly before making the transition into being a PR. So I'd love to understand a little bit about that journey and maybe what that's taught you as a digital PR now, because I feel like that's such a big piece of experience to have.
For sure, yeah. So yeah, I did a journalism degree at Winchester and loved every minute of it. Some of my classmates would probably disagree. It was basically like a full-time job. Not many lectures, very much full-on journalism. Yeah, it was a good time. And I went straight from there to being a video journalist at the Mail Online. And it was a baptism of fire, let's say, but definitely massively influential to have a journalism background in my PR career now. I think it's definitely set me up for a good start in the industry. And I kind of entered digital PR a bit by mistake, if I'm being completely honest. Like during the interview, I was asked if I thought I could get links on news publications, and having been news desk side and actually added links into stories myself, I just thought, sure, like why not? I can do that. Not really kind of having any sort of respect or consideration for actually how difficult it is. But my first links were on the FT, Financial Times, Hello Magazine, and International Business Times, all for insurance brand clients. And it seems like, I think at the time that set me up for a very good start. My boss at the time was pretty chuffed with that. But earning good quality links isn't easy. But having trained and worked as a journalist myself helps massively. You get that benefit of just kind of getting it and understanding how newsrooms operate, knowing what factors make a good story, and not simply like a puff piece. But to be clear, that isn't to say that PRs without a journalism background don't get it by any means. There are hundreds who absolutely do. And when I first started in PR, it took me time to kind of get marketing and what it means to represent a brand. But I think a journalism background certainly has advantages in this industry, and I'm thankful to have had that experience.
Yeah, understanding what a journalist looks for, I feel like, is maybe the key from everybody I've talked to. It sounds like, you called that out a bit there. What would you say, if you had to give some feedback or some wisdom to somebody who's just starting out in the digital PR field, what would be some of those tips that you give based off your experience as a journalist?
Never underestimate how important it is to tailor what you're doing. And I know we hear this constantly from many digital PRs, and there's a reason for that. I feel like digital PR generally is kind of branching into like a hyper tailored camp and then a spray pray camp. And I'm definitely more in the tailored camp. And, like when I think about the kind of spray pray tactics, like I have been there myself. There have been media lists that I've made which are like 1,000, 2,000 contacts long, and you hit the send button and hope for the best. But when I think about the very, very first time I ever sent a pitch in my first job, there was no spray and pray. I tailored it, I thought about it, and that's what got me the links. Even though I didn't have any kind of digital PR background, I knew what journalists wanted. I understood how to tailor my approach. And so I fell into like that spray and pray for a little while because that's what people in the industry preach them. It's a numbers game was the kind of message. But pitching, like outreach, isn't a numbers game, in my honest opinion. It's more qualitative than that. And oddly enough, like a lot of people who I hear the it's a numbers game approach from, kind of more, let's say pure, not that we're not pure, but like pure SEOs. And I'm sure they're very good at what they do, but I think there's an irony in that sentiment. At the same time, they'll readily explain how traffic alone doesn't mean your conversions will increase and people landing on if people landing on your site aren't your target audience. And of course, I agree with that. But guess what? Pitching is the same. So just as selling like a service or product is about targeting the right audience, pitching is about targeting the right journalist with the right story. So for me, it's a lot more nuanced than just saying, okay, let's just send it to thousands of people and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that spray and pray technique that's still around today, like you said, I mean, yeah, although it's moving, do you feel like that spray and pray technique is because media databases don't do a good job of kind of segmenting the audiences or kind of categorizing it? Or is it just people don't have the time and agencies are, kind of rushing to squeeze whatever they can out of the hourly work that people are working?
I think it's definitely a combination of the two. I mean, personally, like I use a lot of media databases to build my lists. Like that's part of my media list building process, but I don't rely on them only. And that's because, I mean, for a start, journalists move around all the time anyway. And so if I worked at a media database company and I was trying to keep it up to date all the time, it would be a massive struggle because it just changes constantly. But a lot of them don't even have some publications on there like at all, and again it's because there's thousands and thousands and thousands in the world. Like how you're never going to have a complete picture. And I think as much as it's nice to kind of strive for this sort of platonic ideal of like the perfect media database, it just doesn't exist. And so you can't just rely on saying, oh, give me some travel journalists and just export and it's done. You don't have to do any qualifying. You absolutely have to do that qualifying because like it's just, I don't know, you're probably not going to get a lot out of it. I feel like that for me, there's no kind of professional integrity in saying, okay, here's a list of 5,000 journalists. I'm just going to hit it and hopefully get like 3 links out of it. Like that, for me, I wouldn't personally be proud of that. I'm more proud of if I've targeted the message correctly and have got a decent number of links from like a more kind of thought about list. But yeah, I can see the budget squeezing thing and trying to get it done as quickly as you can. But then I think if we know that that's not the most effective method, like it seems like a kind of waste of money anyway, even though it's faster. But I feel like, it may for some agencies that kind of tactic might be bringing you some results now, but ultimately I think that method is unsustainable. Like you could get blocked, you could harm your professional reputation, your campaign will get the results you could if you actually put effort in. And I think there are things that are out of our control in PR and can hinder the campaign's ability to done in the right way. A royal might die, or a journalist you thought was perfect for your campaign is, out of office for a month having a nice sabbatical in Italy. Good for them. But what is in your control is the consideration you put into your pitch and your media list. So if you can control that, why wouldn't you? You know?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a lot of stuff there, but that last one, it sounds like it's more of like a mental shift between, I mean, talk about this all the time, like quality over quantity. But even when you're talking about like talking with clients, like, getting that one link, hitting that one journalist, I feel like a lot of people don't think that way, right? Like,
Mm.
the key to this campaign is going to be getting coverage from this one journalist. Where there's the other camp where it's just like, I want as many links as I can get, right? Like, and obviously, like that's the dream, right? Every campaign goes viral and it gets coverage from everybody. But the more we can start to think about it from like a targeted perspective and more strategic, yeah, I mean, we're gonna help the whole industry, I think, and maybe that's tough and kind of idealistic thought process, and but I totally agree with you. The like spray and pray, I don't feel comfortable doing that, and I think it hurts the industry as a whole, and that's why like outreach PRs get a bad name, right?
I feel like most journalists as well can kind of smell a spray and pray pitch a mile off, and like many won't even open it, let alone do anything with it. And you're right, it is fueling that tension between journalists and PRs on a larger scale. And I feel like you'll get some bad actors in our industry who think, so what? It's getting me some results now. And you do you if you absolutely must. But personally, I wouldn't be proud of that. And I feel like, you know, I don't think it's very good. Like I feel like if you're teaching, say, industry newbies or juniors that spray and pray technique, I feel like it doesn't set them up for a professional career that's sustainable, and I feel like it's doing them a disservice. So why? And that's because good digital PR is evolving and becoming like more influenced by what's worked for years in kind of more traditional PR circles, and for the better, I think. And what I mean by that is, it's work that's brand led. It's like considerate and mindful of reputation and the message, but done in a way that kind of understands and complements a wider SEO strategy. And those two together are gold dust. But I think focusing on spray and pray tactics is not developing the skills that juniors need to carve out a successful digital PR career that has longevity, and can take them through to like more agencies and even maybe self-employment.
Yeah, and there's so much strategy to it, right? Like, yeah, if you're trying to learn the business and learn the craft, just finding a general list of here's 1,000 people that work in travel, like that's not going to you have to be able to learn how to target and get specific. So let's actually drill into that. We got the kind of theoretical stuff out of the way that people may roll their eyes at if they, do the spray and pray. But let's talk about. So I think the biggest problem that people have with this is the time spent. We kind of mentioned this a little bit, right? Like, especially in an agency, or if you're a freelancer, you're working hourly basis, or maybe you have a contract for a certain amount of things, but you have a lot of clients you're juggling. It can be tempting, let's say, to kind of cut corners and do the more broad approach because it does take a lot of time to personalize and target email. So let's dig into that a little bit. When we talk about personalization, let's start there. What do we mean by personalization? Is this, hey, I saw you write this article and it was really great and da da da, or is it more in the targeting of finding the specific journalists? I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I feel like when you say personalization, people can take so many different meanings from that. So some people think it literally just means including their first name in the pitch. Great, I mean that's a good start. Better than having the accidental first name
Yeah, right.
like a complete meltdown at your desk. But yeah, so when I think of personalization, I'm not just talking about the name and the whole thing of I saw you said this article and I like this, that, and the other. I wheel that out occasionally when it feels right to do so, but I feel like a lot of the time it feels a little bit disingenuous. And it's like, are you really like my biggest fan right now, PR? Do you know what I mean? That's kind of, if I had that sort of pitch come to me when I worked in journalism, I think, oh, come on, like get to the point, right? I think for me, personalization is tailoring your pitch to the format that journalist likes their stories to be in, how they structure their stories, and what's kind of newsworthy in their beat and why. And that's like the crucial thing, like why does this matter to that person's beat and their audience? So yeah, that's when I talk about personalization, it's a lot more nuanced than kind of like a checkbox exercise of make sure you got their name right, make sure you mention this. It's a lot more nuanced than that. And to how I kind of like how I manage that for a campaign more at scale, like which I often have to do for a hero campaign, which has lots of different kind of angles available to me, and so I want my list to be representative of the scope of the campaign, if you know what I mean. So what I'll do is I will prepare, say, several different pitches, not just like one or two pitch emails with, say, different subject lines. I'm talking like a pitch per angle. And just to like put a number on this, and like say for a data campaign that has like regional or city specific data, I'm talking 20 or so pitches, like 20 or so emails ready, like sequences in my BuzzStream that are specific to say that location. There are shortcuts to get there with things like data campaigns. Like what I'll do is I will basically just do some crazy stuff in Google Sheets to try and like pull in the information I need for this city, for that city, but the rest of the email is basically the same, right? So that's how I kind of speed that process up. But when I've got my list, I basically tidy it so that I have an angle and sometimes even a subject line assigned to each person. And that decision is based on my research into each specific journalist when I'm doing the list. So, I'm asking myself, what piece do they cover and how do they structure their stories? Do they like listicles? Do they prefer case studies? Do they like puns and headlines? Lots of UK tabloids do. It takes time to get that nailed, but once I've got that down, the outreach part in BuzzStream is an absolute breeze. I use filters, bulk send with dynamic fields, and get through my media list fast. There will be times where there are some publications in my media list that are really like super important that I want to nail that. So, and that might be for a few different reasons. It might be from a kind of SEO strategy point of view, like they've never linked to me, but they've linked to my competitors. Like, how can I try and earn a link from them? Or it might be kind of audience based. So, like, this publication's audience is so aligned with my brand's audience. I really want to make this land. For those ones, I'll put a lot more effort into the individual pitch itself. Like, maybe even like 20 minutes to half an hour, like on getting that one pitch nailed. Because if I get it, brilliant, So yeah, that's how I kind of balance sending at scale while also being mindful of personalization and kind of what my strategy and my end goal is for that client.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot to unpack there. It sounds like, if I'm listening to this as an agency, right, it's like we need to find ways to speed up where you can, right? Like, and there are definitely ways. You mentioned kind of using Google Sheets. Personally, before I worked at BuzzStream, I didn't even know we could do these custom fields within like outreach workflow. So yeah, you can set up several custom fields and then import them via a Google Sheet. So like if you're building your list, you have these little notes or whatever you want to add to each of these personalization bits, this city was found to be X%, whatever. You can add those data points in and yeah, kind of like mail merge that all into your campaign. So it sounds like strategic kind of outreach construction almost. It's not just here's a list and shoot the same email or like make one or two templates and that's it. Like the people that I found, and you including, that use BuzzStream at least, that are really successful, do get pretty nuanced with the templates they send. And it's not just one or two per campaign. It's like 10, 20 different templates. So yeah, that sounds to me like a major takeaway for some agencies is to kind of focus in on the education almost of structuring an outreach campaign, and it's not just as straightforward as here's a list and send these couple emails.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, obviously you have to be mindful of what budget you're working with, and I think you can tailor your like while a lot of the tactics that I do for my clients depend on a kind of strategy that I set out for them and what maybe I find works for their competitors. Sometimes the thing that dictates the tactic is the budget. So I think you have to be kind of honest with yourself about like how long would it take me to do this 10, 20 pictures? How can I speed that up if I need to without kind of sacrificing the quality? And it is a balancing act. It's not like a kind of you've got this unlimited budget and you can do the perfect campaign every time. And as much as we'd all like to, I feel like there's probably loads of campaigns out there that digital PRs have done great, but could probably do better if they had the budget for it. But this is the world we live in. There's not an unlimited pot where we can just do everything and then perfect campaign to the nth degree. But I have a campaign for one of my clients, which I absolutely love working on, and it has been really successful. But I haven't even gone after half of the prospects I could have done. But you just have to stop at some point. You have to kind of respect that budget. So yeah, I'm always learning
Yeah.
to balance.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of that comes from experience, right? And the wins and losses that you have. And I mean, you kind of touched on this idea that we talked about last time, which is this agencies. It's tough to run an agency. It's tough to be a freelancer. It's tough to be in the service business where in digital PR specifically, I believe, because it's really hard to come up with a scalable strategy, like service that you can provide to different clients, I guess is what I'm getting at, because there's so much nuance to every
Yeah.
client.
Yeah.
Not every strategy fits every client.
Yeah.
And being able to scale that approach is difficult because, it would be, I think you said this last when we spoke offline, like, it would be lovely to be able to say, "Hey, I'm gonna create 4 blog posts for you, and, you're gonna get X amount of links,"
Yeah.
but it's just not that easy.
No, no. Or even possible. Like, there's so much that goes into outreach which is in your control, and a lot that isn't, and also a sprinkle of luck. And as much as we maybe don't want to admit that, but it is true. It comes down to timing. It comes down to like your message, like what you got approved, what you didn't. Like, do you know what I mean? There's so many different factors that mean you can't accurately predict like input output. It's just not possible in PR.
Yeah. Well, so let's dig into that a little bit. So, as an agency, let's say, or freelance PR, how do you how do you approach a new client and build a strategy that works for them?
That's a solid question, and again, a lot of it depends on budget. So, like some clients will come to me, and I work with both agencies and I like brands directly. Sometimes they'll come to me and they know exactly what they want. They say, right, we have this client, and we, if it's agency, we have this client, and we need a campaign for them, and we need it to launch in October, and it's got to be helping to leverage this keyword set or this product. Great, that's a nice clear brief. I've got something to work with there. Some agencies and brands don't know what they actually need to do to get the links they need. And so for those ones, I like to start with a digital PR strategy. And what goes into that is like masses of kind of competitor analysis, but also having a look at, the kind of things that resonate with, say, that their dream publications or some of the ones that they're not getting, but the competitors are. I think about so maybe even not like from a competitor brand, but from like campaigns that touch on similar topics for them. For an example here, I had a bathroom client years ago, and I did like a travel type campaign for them, but I didn't just look at other bathroom companies doing travel campaigns. I looked at travel campaigns in general, to try and get an idea of what's been working, what's been done, how they did it, that sort of thing. But I think, with a strategy, you can kind of you can figure out what sort of tactics are the most effective within that industry. So let me just think of an example. I do every sort of digital PR tactic as under the sun, right? As long as it's in line with Google's guidelines, and every tactic essentially aims to achieve the same thing, which is coverage and links. And each tactic as well has its own like kind of pros and cons. But yeah, the point, like you were saying, is not every single approach works for brands. And so with that digital PR strategy, you can kind of figure out what tactics work. So for example, if in your strategy you uncover that a brand's link velocity, and by that I mean the kind of rate at which they're earning quality links, say it's massively lagging behind competitors, right? If I was doing that strategy, I might suggest doing lots of kind of mini campaigns and things like editorial outreach, which is where you use your client's existing content as sort of leverage to build links. Now, those tactics are less demanding in terms of the sort of research and production required to make a campaign. Like when you talk about hero campaigns, there's a lot of research, design, dev, loads of different things involved. And they're fantastic, and they have the scope to get lots of links, but they can take a long time to execute. Smaller scale campaigns and kind of using what you already get, it's faster. It allows you to pitch more regularly to press because it's faster. And you can bank as much of the budget as possible into outreach, which should improve the link velocity. So that's how I kind of connect like data to action, and think about, okay, what tactics should I do next? That like it doesn't mean that, like, say if your strategy thinks, oh, okay, there's two tactics here that will work for you. That's not to say that you shouldn't consider flexing later down the line if the opportunity presents itself. So, and this is kind of where all that nuance comes in, and it's just like, yeah, a minefield for someone who's not in PR. But when you are, you kind of just, I don't know, the experience helps you know how to pivot, and what to try, and what's working there and then.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you have an extensive toolkit, which comes from experience. Are there places that you recommend people learn and build their toolkit, like resources online? Like, where did you learn all of your kind of tools and strategies?
When you say toolkit, do you mean actual tools and software, or do you mean like tactics for?
Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, like tactics.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, it's like a mixture of places where I've picked it up from. So when I joined the team at iProspect, it was great because there was, you know, more than one person in the digital PR department, and I could kind of learn from what they've done, what has worked, what hasn't worked, that sort of thing. We brought on a head of digital PR while we were there, Louise Parker, who's now at Pelanet. She was brilliant. Shout out Louise. And yeah, taught us lots of different things that we could do. And then, you know, another, like, I didn't even kind of really pay too much attention to say, like, recipient, like journalists as a recipient, their sort of behaviors with the pitch I'm sending them, until we hired Anila, who was fantastic. And she's the one who taught me all about BuzzStream open rates, Lanced opens, that kind of thing. And I would start sort of paying a lot more attention to that because she mentioned it, you know, so that you kind of learn from the
Mhm, mhm.
community, and then learn from testing, you like doing it yourself as well. I feel like there's a balance to strike between learning and doing, and I feel like often doing is the most important thing. Like, you know, you won't, like, I've made mistakes. Everyone who's been digital PR has made mistakes, but you don't learn from that and hone your process until you actually do it. So yeah, just do it. Would be
Just
my
do it.
advice.
Yeah. No, I mean, I talk like people that ask me about getting into digital PR and like where they should start. I usually say try to like intern at an agency or get a
Yeah,
junior position at an agency because you have so much exposure to different brands and tactics and industries. You mentioned another thing when you're talking about building the strategies and figuring out what tactics you're going to kind of wield for a different client. You mentioned it sounds like taking more of like an SEO first approach, right? And by SEO, I mean, you mentioned like looking at doing like a link analysis and like seeing where they're getting links and link velocity. Some of those are things that, you know, a client might not know, right? So is that kind of your approach? Is the SEO first approach?
ideally, yeah,
Yeah.
like, you know,
And,
so
and why is that? Yeah.
because it helps to inform what I'm doing, and can connect it to the sort of wider SEO strategy. So for me, like, the ideal kind of setup is I'm working with an SEO and possibly even a content or a copywriter at that brand. And I have like a kind of good workflow with those specialists, because digital PR, I feel like one mistake that some people can make is thinking PR is separate to SEO. Digital PR is SEO. It is like one of the three pillars. So like having a strategy which is mindful of that is really important, and the thing that will help you get results. You know, there's so many times where you might see a campaign, it's like, oh, we got 80 links, isn't that great? What did it do for you? What did it help your rankings? Did it help your sales? What was the outcome of that? And I think if you don't connect it to your SEO goals, it can be really hard to measure that, and to quantify that, basically. And so, you know, I'm not just going, when I do my PR work, I'm obviously trying to get them the kind of brand awareness and get their name out there and all the positive things from traditional PR, but with the kind of with SEO mindset there to help them do even better.
Yeah, there's like a kind of like top-down approach to branding, and then there's like the bottom-up SEO approach. I feel like, you know, that you can come at it from both ways. And yeah, I think it's so important to link that. Like starting with the SEO, I think it was James Brockbank I spoke to from Digital Wealth. He put this really well, which I thought was, you know, we talked about kind of the differences and the benefits of digital PR and PR in general. And like we asked this question of like, if Google wasn't around, would your PR still support you?
Yeah.
Right? Like would all of the PR efforts still support you? And kind of having that mindset, you can start to connect the dots between the traditional PR and branding and the business in general and like where you're getting links from. And but yeah, to your point, like when there's that disconnect, it just becomes a numbers game for one team and a numbers game for another team. And
Yeah.
so what would you say is the easiest for you? You know, you're starting with a new client. What do some of those talks look like to make sure that kind of everything is in alignment?
Yeah. I mean, for some clients, I go, or as many as I can, I go through this quite detailed onboarding process, and I'm asking them questions that are to do with their site, like their technical SEO, their on-site content, also their like kind of broader business goals. So like not even considering PR or SEO, like what do they do? What are they trying to achieve? Who are their audience just as a business? I think you can't just look at PR or SEO sort of in isolation. It's all part of this kind of marketing mix, right? So yeah, I'm asking questions like that to get like a full context of what is this all about, and having that knowledge, being armed with that knowledge, really helps me to figure out what kind of sort of press ideas, like whether it's a mini campaign or a hero campaign, or whether I'm using their existing content, no matter what tactic I'm doing. Having that initial context is so valuable to me because I can sort of match it up, and then when I'm having, say if I put some ideas together and I'm going through them with my client and seeing what one they want to run with, I try and make sure that all of my ideas connect to their sort of broader strategy in one way or another, and show how that connects. Because if it doesn't, what's the point? And, to what you were saying about James's point about, if Google didn't exist, like, would it make sense for your brand to say this? Or would it, that is so important to what I think about when I'm coming up with ideas. There was the time of kind of completely irrelevant campaigns, and we've all done them, those of us who have been in the industry long enough. But the more I do it, like the more I kind of learn and the more experienced I'll become. I don't do those now. It's all about being super relevant to the brand with SEO in mind, and trying to kind of like balance the needs of that.
Yeah, yeah, that's great to hear. I think it serves, for me right now, I feel like, we're recording this August 23rd. There's been so many changes in the Google landscape, SEO landscape, that have kind of repercussions to how digital PRs and how link builders and how SEOs kind of view each other's craft, and how brands view, link building, digital PR. And I've been kind of formulating this hypothesis that everything is kind of moving more and more towards digital PR. And it's for all those same reasons that you're saying. Like, I think the brand itself is becoming so important. The strength of your brand,
Yeah,
being able to show up in these large language models,
yeah,
on AI overviews, and Google is even like the Google leak that came out a few months ago showed that, and whether or not they still use these signals, I'm sure they do, showed that they really prioritize links and coverage from specifically areas on a site that got a lot of clicks, and areas on a site that had a lot of fresh content that was updated frequently. And, lo and behold, that's what digital PR really aims to solve for.
yeah,
It's been an interesting kind of time to educate people and try to push them away from these older tactics that, I don't know, it's like snake oil kind of like, hey, I can, you can pay me $20 and I'll get you 100 links, or like, here's this link exchange network and all this
mhm.
kind of stuff.
No, for
Um, it, it just seems like the digital PR is the way to go with this. So with that in mind, there are a couple tactics too that you had mentioned. I made some notes here, and then I want to dig into a little bit. So you mentioned this idea, and I'm not sure if you said this on this podcast or in our offline talk, but what you called editorial outreach,
Mhm.
which was using clients' existing content for outreach. And you did say that earlier, like that's how one of the first things that you do when you're evaluating a client is like, hey, can I just use this
Yeah.
existing content? It's cheaper. Let's talk a little bit about that and like what you evaluate in the content itself, because I think that's an easy win for some people and can kind of
Definitely,
help
yeah.
shift the mindset a little. Yeah.
Sure. So I think like to get started with editorial outreach, and again, like just to kind of reiterate to your listeners, like what I mean by that is going through the kind of stuff that's maybe on your client's blog, or even like kind of other areas of their site, like maybe even the about section, or maybe even like the kind of product description of like a certain category. There might be something in there that you could repurpose into a comment. Basically anything and everything that's on your client's site. What pages are there that you could use as kind of as leverage to do some outreach with. And the beauty of this tactic is that you don't have to kind of start from scratch and try and get loads of budget signed up to create something new, go through all the kind of sign off process with like, is this message right for us? Do we want to do this? Like, actually, no, we can't say this. We need to say that. And then it just becomes diluted, you know. I think editorial outreach is a brilliant place to start. And I mean, you can start by doing it by like just trawling through the site and just see if anything leaks out at you. But personally, like going back to what we were talking about earlier, I'd say the best place to start is with that strategy and competitor analysis. And doing that like does allow you to kind of better understand what kind of topics are earning links in your niche. And you know, way back when, just to give you an example, when I worked on that bathroom brand, after looking at competitor links, I saw a couple getting links around World Water Day, right? And it kind of seems obvious in hindsight, but I probably wouldn't have even thought of that without seeing it work from competitors. And rather than, like, say, starting from scratch with like creating a campaign landing page or trying to think of these kind of big creative ideas to connect to World Water Day, I just run a check through the site. And a good way to do this is just with search parameters. So I do site brand URL and then a keyword. So in this case, it was save water or water. And from doing that, I found a mixture of things. I found products. They had some water saving shower heads that I didn't know about. I found some editorial stuff, you know, tips to use less water in the bathroom. And this was from a blog post 2 years prior, just on their site. Things about like stats around water usage, that sort of thing. And I earned a handful of links just by leveraging stuff that already exists, and their products were front and center. So it's a tactic that's worked throughout my career. Like fast forward to more recent times, I did a strategy for a flooring company and some stuff that worked for competitors. There was content on my client's site about how to fix squeaky floors. And I just repurposed that, turned it into a kind of expert-led sort of mini pitch, like a kind of mini press release, just with like commentary about how to fix them. And yeah, got some pieces with that. Like that sort of tactic isn't necessarily it's gonna end up in PR week or like go viral. And you know, it doesn't typically drive as much coverage as you might get with a larger scale campaign, but it can be a lot more budget friendly, and kind of make the content that you already have work even harder. And like having done that throughout my career, that kind of process, I think there's ways that it can be improved in terms of like a workflow. And for me, like the best ways to do it are work very closely with your brand's content marketing or like copywriting team. Find out their content schedule if you can, and like scan through some pieces before they're live. You know, sometimes like when I'm doing that with my current clients, I might suggest kind of small additions that could make that page more linkable once it does go live, or like more newsworthy. And then what I'll do is I will maybe take out snippets from the content and basically repurpose it into like a spokesperson comment, and then that's there ready to go whether I'm doing proactive or reactive outreach. It's just in like a kind of bank of commentary, and yeah, it just basically makes what you already have work a lot harder.
Yeah. One thing that is kind of sticking out to me here is a realization I had, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, or maybe this isn't as prominent in the States, but um, there is like this tactic around kind of pitching informational articles to journalists. And whether or not they use all the information you give them, I've seen that happen, right? Where you mentioned kind of like a mini press release, right? Like, so like you find an article on your client site, it's got great information. Maybe you supplement it with a couple expert quotes. Then you're actually just kind of pitching that whole thing. And it's usually like seasonal content, right? Like in the summer, if you have an air conditioning client, you know, how to stay cool, and you're pitching it to these journalists that you know cover this kind of stuff every year because it gets hot or it gets cold in winter or whatnot, and kind of reading it, being able to shoehorn your client in there, but in a way that you're kind of presenting them as an expert, but really you're writing a majority of the article for a journalist, right? Um, do you is that right? Is that kind of how you look at it? And then B, you find that that is as common in the US as the UK?
So I don't, when I do editorial outreach, I don't necessarily like rewrite the whole thing and then use that as a pitch, if you know what I mean. Or like expect the journalist to kind of use it almost like word for word. Obviously, some will because like maybe they don't have like all the resources on their news desk, but like no, not. I kind of just use it like in a few ways. One, like sometimes the piece of content on the site is good to go and can be like fantastic leverage for outreach. Like, I don't know what it might be. Maybe like you said, tips about how to stay cool. What I would do with something like that is I would turn it into a pitch, not necessarily a press release, but yeah, I'll turn it into a pitch, and it's like, hi, journalist, temperatures are going to reach 35 degrees here today, or like in the next couple of days. Here's those ways that you can keep cool or sleep in a heat wave. And this comes from expert so and so, and then give a bio, and then kind of take snippets from the content on my client's site and kind of turn it into quotes. Not necessarily word for word. Like, some of it will just be like a little bit too salesy, because that's what that blog post is trying to do. You know, it's got the kind of like
Right.
CPAs and stuff, but that's not what my pitch is trying to do. My pitch is trying to get coverage, and so I will kind of pick out the most newsworthy piece, like newsworthy things, and turn it into sort of tips. And then I'll ask for the link at the end. I'll be like, if you'd like to use this, please attribute it to expert name, our company, link. And yeah, that's what I mean when I talk about editorial outreach. I'll kind of like repurpose what I've already got and turn it into something that will work for a journalist.
Yeah. Does the date published, like the published date of the existing content, does that ever get in the way? Like, you mentioned, like, here's a blog post from 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You have to refresh that data. Is that pitchable still?
I think again it depends on where I'm trying to get them to link to. So ideally they would link to the blog post that is like literally about the thing that I'm sending to them. Sometimes it will just be the homepage link. Sometimes it would be a product link, so I have to kind of think, where am I trying to get them to link to? If I'm trying to get them to link to the blog post and it makes sense for them to do so, then I might chat to the SEO team or a content person, be like, can we update this and update the dates just to make it a bit fresher? But not always. Like, I don't. There's always a need to do that. Like with the bathroom client, I didn't have to do that. I just kind of turned it into. But I just sort of used some of the tips to help me write a bit of a press release, and then mostly the thing I was pushing was their water saving shower heads. So the product isn't dated; it's in stock. Let's go. So that's kind of how I evaluate it as I'm working through.
Yeah, that's great advice. The one other thing I wanted to catch before you leave is, so we mentioned how obviously, like, there's no one size fits all strategy or tactic for any client. But in your years of doing this, do you have any specific tips or tricks for like different tactics that seem to work better in different industries? Does a specific tactic work better in fashion versus entertainment? I feel like this is a good way to end. Give a couple little tips and tricks for people.
Sure. Yeah. So okay, let me think of an industry. So okay, I'm working on a couple of brands at the moment in the homes and interiors space, for example. And yeah, they're both in homes and interiors, but they have totally different digital PR budgets. They have different product offerings, audiences, and even totally different price points. One's more the kind of budget end, the other's more luxury. And when I think about what's working in that niche in digital PR today, rarely do I see like a kind of creative hero campaign perform exceptionally well in that sector. Now, the stuff that I see doing consistently well is thought leadership, expert commentary, whether it's proactive or reactive. That isn't to say that hero campaigns don't work, period. A lot of it is about the story. So, working with an agency, I ran a hero campaign for a flooring company, and it took a while to like get some coverage at first, but fast forward a few months later, 60 pieces of coverage across online and print, and 40 links. So I'm really happy with that. So I think, like I was saying, like, even though we can see these trends that kind of expert commentary works really well in this sector, and yeah, for one of my clients, that's the only thing I do because it consistently gets some coverage. It works really well. If an opportunity presents itself, or like if the SEO strategy is like, oh, we really need to kind of drive our rankings for this particular product category or keywords there, then you kind of have to think, okay, let's work from there. What will work with PR and supplement that SEO strategy, and kind of, yeah, sometimes that is a hero campaign. But like, yeah, taking a totally different sector and brand side, like I work with an amazing non-profit called Earth FM. They're essentially like Spotify, but for nature sounds. You should check them out. They're brilliant. And the digital PR strategy I did for them suggested like some sort of kind of hybrid type of resource link building, weirdly enough, would work. But also a gap in the market for the kind of bigger hero campaign piece. Like lots of the competitors weren't doing that. I say competitors, it's a charity, but lots of them weren't doing it. And so I started off with kind of leveraging the Earth FM website almost like a tool in itself. Like they have like an interactive map where you can basically virtually travel the world and listen to these incredible nature sounds. And I've also been doing the odd piece of like sort of reactive PR for them in tandem. But the thing that really worked for them was a big hero campaign. And the concept we did was the quietest places in the world's loudest cities, or some of the world's loudest cities, to be completely accurate. And it's done impeccably well. Like we're talking like 80 referring domains. It's got placements in Forbes, BBC, Secret Manchester, Boston.com, lots of US regionals. And what it's delivered for them is, they hit an all-time high global organic traffic. And that isn't necessarily just down to digital PR. I'm kind of also working with their SEOs and their content team. But yeah, it's done really well for them. So you have to kind of look at what is working in the niche you're working within, and what sort of things the journalists you want to target tend to write about, and shape your tactics based on that insight.
Yeah, and it sounds like don't be afraid to pivot based off of their needs. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of the theme and major takeaway for me and talking with you is as much as me as a content creator want to kind of extract these like, here's exactly what you should do for this, it's never going to be that cut and dry. So it's more a matter of, gaining experience through trial and error, doing your due diligence up front and gathering as much information as you can, and then kind of trusting your gut, it sounds like, in a lot of these instances, and trusting the process that you're putting in place.
Yeah.
Well, Olivia, this has been awesome. So much to take away from this. I will put links to as much as I can in the show notes here, especially some of these great clients that you just mentioned as well. But for those of you listening, Olivia, you could find her on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
That's where she's most active. Yeah, Olivia, thanks so much.
Thank you.
This has been great. I really appreciate the time. For anybody listening, please like, subscribe, give a thumbs up. Let us know what you think in the comments. I'm sure Olivia would be happy to answer any questions you have about any of these tactics, strategies. Share this podcast with people. The more that we can get listeners and watchers and subscribers and all that good stuff, the more I can bring on great guests like Olivia. So again, big thank you to Olivia, and thanks for watching.
Thanks so much. Cheers.